So far, we've been introduced to a bunch of built-in Spring annotations that we use them to help the Spring to actually, and we teach the Spring IOC container to be able to provide the objects and to wire the dependencies and provide instances. So there is this niche pattern, I want to say, that the Spring uses a lot, and that is composing annotations. And this pattern is, as I said before, is widely used inside the Spring. And I actually came to realization that this will be the prerequisite of the next episode. So I actually decided to talk about this pattern here and show you how it is done, so that when we, for example, move to episodes like qualifiers, we'll be able to know what is the rationale behind them. So, as I said before, we've been introduced to a bunch of well-known built-in IOC container annotations, like, for example, the add component annotation, which they call it the stereotype. So they are the component annotation is for stereotyping the classes that we want them to actually, we want the IOC container to build a bean definition for them. So this niche pattern that is widely used inside the IOC container is creating custom annotations for our own that is actually annotated with other annotations of the Spring. So the reason that we do that is because, first off, actually we could use this pattern for make our application more readable. For example, let's say that we've got a lot of components, and a bunch of them are actually could be grouped into some category, and let's say that we want to distinguish them by a specific annotation, and we don't want to annotate all of them with add component. So we could create a custom annotation. Let me just quickly demonstrate what I'm talking about. So we are creating an annotation here. Let's say that we want to annotate the classes that are about vehicles. So I'm going to create this annotation named vehicle. And if you know about the Java annotations, we have to at least determine two things, actually specify two things. One of them is the retention, and the other of them is the target. So the retention, which is itself an annotation, by specifying the retention, we are saying that, let me see, because the annotation might be removed at the runtime, we are telling the JVM and the compiler to keep this annotation in the runtime. So you have to specify the retention as runtime, all the annotations that you are going to create of your own. The other thing that we have to specify is the target. So by target, we are saying that we are specifying the places that this annotation could be placed on them. For example, if we want to specify that this annotation, this new annotation, could be used on top of classes or on top of methods or fields or parameters, we could specify them just individually, one by one, So because the vehicle is an annotation that we want to only use them on top of classes, so I'm going to only give the type. We could give an array and give a bunch of values. So we have this target, we have the retention. Now this is a normal Java annotation. But now we want to actually add a behavior to this annotation and bring it to life, actually, the way that the Spring understands it. To do that, let's say that we want to specify that this vehicle annotation could be used instead of an add component annotation. So we could actually annotate it with add component. So by annotating this vehicle with the add component, we are introducing a new stereotype annotation that we could use actually. So we could annotate this one with vehicle instead of component. Let's say we have another class named truck and we want to annotate it with vehicle as well. So now we've got these two classes annotated with vehicle instead of component. Now here you might, and this will work actually. Let me run and you'll see that this is working as before. And you might actually wonder what is the need for creating annotations, custom annotations. So there are a bunch of reasons here, but some of them actually will be revealed more in the future episodes. But let me just enumerate them one by one. Actually, the first thing that you see here, that you encounter, is that it is helping the readability. Actually, there is no doubt there. So we could have a bunch of annotations for actually make the application more readable. The second reason that we could use these composed annotations is that we could actually compose a bunch of other annotations on top of a new annotation and add and compose their behaviors and add those behaviors to this single annotation. Because we've not been introduced to other annotations, like for example, like scope or lazy or depends on, or there are a bunch of other annotations that we have not been introduced to, and we will be seeing them in the future episodes. But we could, for example, add 2 or 3 annotations here and group them into a single annotation, and again help the program to be more readable. That is another reason for creating custom annotations. The other reason for creating custom annotations is actually when we see the aspect-oriented programming, or AOP for short, you'll see that we could extend the behavior of classes. We could inject behavior inside the classes without letting them know actually. So if we could have custom annotations, we could specify actually specific behaviors for a category of components, for example, and that could help a lot. And you'll see that the Spring uses this feature, this composed annotations, a lot. So I want to here mention a bunch of terminology. So this add component annotation is, they call it the meta annotation, because we could use this annotation on top of other annotations to compose, to create a new annotation. Now this vehicle annotation, they call it meta annotated annotation, because it has been annotated by a meta annotation. And we could compose a bunch of meta annotations on top of a new annotation, as I said before. So those are a bunch of bunch of terminology that we have to know here. Now let me just introduce a bunch of built-in custom annotations that are stereotype annotations themselves. So we've had this vehicle of our own here, and we've been using the component, but actually there are a bunch of other stereotypes like service or like repository. Let me just real quick show you what is inside the service. So inside the service, you could see that we have this target, which is untyped, and the retention, which is runtime. Now just ignore this documented. And as you can see, the service is annotated with add component. So the Spring itself is actually using, as I said, is using this pattern widely actually, and we will be using them as well. But because this is actually a prerequisite to the next future episodes, I just wanted to mention it right here in this episode. So let me just show you other thing, which is this alias for annotation. So when we annotate an annotation with another annotation, as you know, inside this component annotation, there are a bunch of attributes. They call this fields as attributes. So each annotation could have a bunch of attributes for itself. And when we compose a bunch of annotation on top of our own, so there must be a way for us to, because each of these annotations might have a bunch of attributes that should be provided, should be filled by the user of the annotation. So there must be a way that the user of this new annotation could actually define those attributes through this new annotation. So as you can see, the component annotation, which is a meta annotation, has this value attribute, which is default to empty string. So this value is the name of the bean definition. If we don't pass a value, it will by default get the name of the class as the bean definition name. But if we provide a name, it will actually grab that name and set it as the name of the bean definition. Now, when we try to create a new annotation, we have to specify a new some attributes to ask the values from users, and then pass those values to the annotations that we are inheriting from them. Actually, we have been composed by them. So we could name this anything here. Let's, for example, name it I don't know, bean name, bean definition name, or the value. As you know, the value is a special attribute name here, because if the attribute name of the annotation is value, then there is no need to specify the name of the parameter that I'll be showing you. And let's make it default as empty string. Now we want to say that this value, so here, let me show you. Here we are saying this vehicle, and now we could say the value equals to, for example, we are specifying the name of the bean definition. Let's say it is the car, I don't know. Now, because we are expecting this value to be inserted inside the component that actually parents annotation, so we have to tell the Spring by this @alias_for, which is another annotation from the Spring framework. Actually, we are telling that this is @alias_for attribute of name value inside the annotation that we have been composed by the name of component.class. So now when the user gives this name, the Spring will actually replace the vehicle with this annotation on our behalf and will pass this value to the component. So again, inside the service, you could see that they have done the same here. They've done the same, and they have put this @alias_for. So that is another thing that I wanted to tell you. And by using the @alias_for, now I don't want to dig deep here. I just want to scratch the surface and show you the usability of this composed annotations. And for example, with @alias_for, there are terminologies like explicit, implicit, intransitive overrides, and something like that. But I just wanted to show you real quick that how it is done. So in the future episode, we will be talking about the @qualifier annotation, which is a way for resolving the ambiguity, and there you'll see that this composed annotations are used a lot.